All right, so we are ready. So I will invite Anne. Anne is the national coordinator. Anne is a national coordinator for the Kenya Platform for Climate Governance. That is under Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. She's involved in climate change, the environment, natural resource management, as well as policy and advocacy. She's a policy and advocacy expert. So I'd like to invite Anne. She'll be having some PowerPoints to present. So Anne, you can let me know when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Patricia. Sorry, I was trying to fix we got a blackout over here, and also we had problems with connections.
Alsaba, anything from your
I hope you can hear me. Patricia, I hope you can hear me.
You can hear from
We
this
can
side.
hear you. We can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Patricia, can you hear me?
We can hear you from this side. And
Oh, good. Allow me
yes.
to proceed, and sorry for that hitch. My name is Anne Tek. I'm the National Coordinator for the Kenya Platform for Climate Governance. I'm making this presentation on behalf of Charles, Mwangi, who is the head of programs at the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. So once again, thank you for inviting us to this forum. I'm just going to make a presentation on what PACJA is doing on areas of climate justice. So to our next slide. So what is PACJA? PACJA is Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. It's a continental coalition of over 1,000 CSOs from over 51 countries. It was founded in 2008 in Johannesburg, South Africa, but its headquarters is in Kenya. So PACJA brings together different organizations, including faith-based organizations, non-governmental and inter-organizations, trust, foundation, farmers, pastoralists, groups, among other sectors. So we work with government to drive the African agenda at the international level. So we do have strong partnership with different international partners in the south, in the north, and in the south. Next slide, please. So how do we look at climate change from PACJA's perspective? So from our lens, we look at climate change, one, as a poverty issue. It has increased poverty in the world. Second, we look at it as an equity issue, which has caused disproportionately affected those poor countries and vulnerable sectors of the society. We look at it as a justice issue. The problem was caused by the rich countries, and the people in the poor are most affected. We look at it as also a humanitarian issue because many of these catastrophes are disasters are caused by climate events. We look at it as an economic issue. It has stunted growth of some economies, while big economies fear cutting emissions will affect emissions, which will affect them. We look at climate change as a political issue because currently it's shaping international diplomatic and political interactions agenda 2030, that is the SDG, and the South. Next, please. So how do we define climate justice? So climate change can have disproportionate social, economic, public health, and other adverse effects on underprivileged populations. Climate change does create injustices whereby those least responsible for the crisis suffer the greatest harm. So climate justice seeks to have these inequalities addressed head-on through long-term mitigation and adaptation strategies. So the dimension of climate justice is one, we look at it as a distributive justice, as in who should bear the duty of addressing the climate change and who should benefit. We look at it as a redistributive justice, those who have caused climate change should lead in fixing the problem. And we look at it as a procedural justice. Those most affected must participate in decision-making process. Next, please. So how do we frame climate justice in Africa? Most of us knows well that we contribute at least less than 4% of the greenhouse gases emissions in terms of which causes global warming, unlike other developed countries which produces over 80% of the greenhouse gases. We have unpredicted rains, extended period of droughts, strong storms, and other extreme weathers, which are wiping out crops, drying up of water resources, and driving diseases outbreaks. We know that climate change also poses systematic risk to Africans' economies, infrastructure investments, water and food systems, public health, agriculture, and livelihoods. So in sub-Saharan Africa, we actually 90% of we rely on rain-fed agriculture, which is an economy which is vulnerable to climate change. And 34 out of the 54 African countries are actually classified as the least developed countries. So this creates a climate injustice in that the region least responsible for climate change is easily the most vulnerable to the adverse effects, and under the Paris Agreement is required to help solve the problem. Next, please. How do we look at climate justice through the African lens? One, next, please. We look at climate action. We say that climate actions must be fair, equitable, ecologically just, and responsive to the needs of those most vulnerable in the society. Then second, climate justice means those who are primarily responsible for climate change, that is, those whose mode of production and consumption has resulted in accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, own up to their mistakes, take deliberate measures to stop the mistakes. And number three, climate justice means those who have caused climate change should own up to their debts they have accrued from the victims of the actions and compensate. Fourth, we look at climate justice lens as meaning giving those who have no voice and those who are feeling the biggest impact of climate change sufficient space and voice to articulate their challenges, and solutions. Then number five, climate justice means reverting from the old ways of doing things and embracing development pathways which balance between the needs of the current and future generations. And lastly, climate justice means living in building consciousness where humanity lives in independence with the nature. Next, Patricia. So we focus on 5 strategic areas. One is resilience and green growth. The other one is public engagement. We do a lot of public engagement and mobilization. Second, we capitalize on research knowledge and communication. Third, policy influence. And lastly, holding government accountable. So our main thematic areas is on climate finance because we believe, there's no climate actions without climate finance. We believe in just transition and energy access and resilience people, societies, and economies. So what is our change narrative? Our change narrative is that enhanced civil society capacities and their effectiveness is coordination, strategically engaging in various governmental spaces, both national and continental level, will enable them transform conventional development pathways to low carbon climate resilient development pathway, catalyze change and ensure pro-poor and people-centered narratives to form the basis for implementation of provisions of Paris Agreement and contributions to the achievement of Agenda 2030. So that is our change narrative. How do we influence climate change policies and processes? One, our approach is multi-pronged. We are well anchored to the subnational level through our subnational platforms, which influence policies at that level, that is in our 51 platforms. The national level processes are driven by our designate national platforms. And lastly, regional and global level processes are driven in collaboration with national platforms and the regional partners. So we have a number of initiatives as the PACJA. One is we've held the African regional forum for development. So we had one meeting we've had meetings in Niger. We had a COP 28 strategy meeting in Ethiopia this year, bringing different actors together in preparation for COP 28. So we are currently preparing for the position for COP 28. We had a post-COP in Rwanda late last year after Sharm el-Sheikh, just to analyze what happened in COP and plan for the next COP. This year, early this year, we also had a loss and damage symposium in Malawi. Recently, especially after the cyclone in the South African region. Next, please. Last year we participated in COP27. We had a campaign on the road to COP, which we are calling the Climate Justice Torch Campaign, which we did a lot of advocacy through regional bodies, governments, towards COP as we shared our position. So the torch was delivered to the COP presidency in Sharm el-Sheikh. We had an AMSEN African Ministerial Conference on environment in Senegal last year as well, just to prepare the African ministers on the climate change. Next, please. We've also participated in the African Climate Week in Gabon last year, just in preparation as well for the COP27. We had also the climate change development also forum in Namibia. Before that was late last year as well. We do have two other initiatives. One is the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice, where we bring different youths from all over the region and all over the country, all over the world, to teach youth on climate justice. This was the second cohort, and we plan to have next cohort. The third cohort will be in Nairobi in June next year. We have currently over 2,000 applicants from all over the world who wish to participate in this training. We do have an initiative called the ESSA Award, where we annually award our journalists who report on environment and climate change. Next. We also have what we call PAMAC, which is a Pan-African Media Alliance and Climate Change, which brings together luminaries from the ESSA Awards, the journalists across Africa. The main aim is actually to generate critical mass of journalists for African narrative on environment and climate change. And this is hosted in our West African office. We have the African Coalition on Sustainable Development on renewable energy. We have, which is also being hosted in West Africa, driving the renewable energy in Africa, and has emerged as a key platform for energy discourse. We working with allies in the North and South to vote for the transition of low carbon climate resilience development pathway for off-grid people-controlled, democratic, decentralized, and affordable energy system, and conducting research in various countries to inform its advocacy, and working with partners both at the North and South. So this is basically on energy. Next, please. The two other initiatives is the African Climate Legislative Initiative, which briefly provides for capacity building and networking and coordination on parliamentarians in climate change dialogue and responsive process in Africa. This is one of, as we speak, we do have the Pan-African Climate Summit in South Africa today, where our president is participating. So this is one of the initiatives that support that process. We have the Afro-Descendants Collaboratives on Racials and Climate Justice in partnership with PACJA and NSCCAP, which promotes South-North collaboration, policy engagement with the US Senate and policymakers, among other initiatives by that process. So our key thematic priorities, as I had mentioned, is resilience, people, societies, and economies. So we are looking at promoting national platforms in the African countries, transboundary networking, working with governments and intergovernmental partners such as African Group of Negotiators, African Union, Climate etc. We also have a component on just transition and energy access, which I had mentioned, the AXIA process, more or less looking at fossil fuel campaigns, trade unions, climate-related projects, and supporting communities facing evictions. We have a component on climate finance, that is in participating and monitoring climate finance dialogue, tracking investment, and periodic analysis. Next, please. So our key success factors is stakeholders mapping. We look at stakeholders mapping as our crucial element for climate justice programming. So our important questions are, who are our allies? As we advocate on climate justice, we look at who are our allies, who are our advisories, which governments have bigger influence over others, who are the most influential non-state actors, which individuals should we target? So those are the key questions we ask ourselves as we advocate on climate justice. So this is just an analysis on who decides in climate negotiations. So there's a lot of involvement of men and women and national delegations during the UNFCCC negotiations. So we factor in the gender component, gender as an important component. This is informed by even our participation of women across the region in the COP processes. So the youthful generation is the game changer. We've seen a lot of youth engage in the climate change dialogue. So we feel that the youthful generation, because we engage them because the future belongs to the young people. Second, the African demography is skewed towards the young people. I know most of the countries have over 60% of youth. Then the African youth have become vocal in the climate justice campaign. Young people can effectively unlock the potential of digital technologies in shaping the climate narratives. And it is absolutely necessary to include the youth in climate change programming. We've seen this through our Nairobi Summer School. We've seen most of the most of the alumni is now engaging in climate change agenda through art, through social media engagement. We have what we call the YDA Young Digital Activist model, which across Africa we have young people whom we engage them to talk about African narratives on climate justice. So there's a lot of youth now engaging in climate change space through our two initiatives. So we also have locally led actions, which is a new paradigm shift. We know that climate justice debate is now going towards the communities at the front line of the climate crisis, and the actions that target the most vulnerable among us are most desirable. So the paradigm shift is now moving from top-up approach to bottom-up approach in this context. We now have programs supporting local communities through our small grant facilities, where we are supporting local initiatives. And I think the model is a new paradigm shift. So our critical issues of interest is one, implementation of the Paris Agreement and the nationally determined contribution, the role of the non-state actors in local climate action, and also the shrinking civic space, which is an impediment to climate action, and also the shifting donor priorities. Like I said, now there's a lot of support towards women, youth, and the marginalized, and also towards the locally led actions. So I'll end it there and welcome your comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Anne, for the presentation and for the extensive work you've achieved in social justice, in climate, you call it climate justice, across the continent and not just in Kenya. What are your observations about radicalizing climate change and in the context of climate justice? What measures do you have in place to prevent this radicalizing of climate change as an extreme issue beyond what it is?
Thanks, Collins. I mentioned the fact that one of our key component areas is capacity building, and part of the capacity building and sensitization is to teach the public, and especially the youth and the most vulnerable, on what really climate change is. So by engaging in that conversation, we are able to teach the public for them to understand what climate change is, so that there is reduced radicalization, I know climate change has been used to advance some agendas which are not really climate change. So our role as PACJE is to ensure that our platforms are able to teach the public, either through mainstream or social media platforms, on what really climate change is.
Thank you very much. Concerning justice, I noticed that there is a focus on the poor, the vulnerable, the youth, the women, and the like, who are vulnerable. In justice, is there a context where businesses, profit-making entities, and individuals are also considered to be vulnerable? Because a lot about the climate change targets the profitability, reduction in people's profitability or livelihoods or job employment, things like that. So how is this category of people whose livelihoods, businesses, or even the country's taxation being reduced because of the need for climate change agenda? How does the justice system contextualize this category of people?
Interesting question, Collins. I think our first target groups, like you mentioned, are the marginalized, the women, the youth, people living with disability, and the indigenous groups. Why? Is because those are people who have no voice or have no channel to voice their concerns. These are people who, when there are catastrophes, they are most affected and they have no alternative livelihoods. Business for us, because being non-profit, business for us comes second. I would mention that, unfortunately. But we try as much as possible to support policies that ensure that business stabilizes even during these hazards. During these droughts or floods or any other catastrophe that is caused by climate change. So, like I said, our first beneficiary are those who have no voice. Second is ensuring that the private sector, we don't work alone. We ensure that also we have conversations with the private sector so that they're able to have systems in place, have policies in place, have financing mechanism in place, ensure that the taxing regime is friendly so that even during those catastrophes, they're able to be resilient. So our conversation is more on the vulnerable, but we don't forget the other groups through our advocacy, our policy support, our engagement with government. So I'll put it that way, Collins.
Get a question I saw a hand from Asha.
Thank you so much, Collins, for the opportunity. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Anne, for that very amazing presentation. So in your presentation, you talked about the youth, viewing the youth as the game changer. So my question is, what measures or strategies have you put in place to ensure that there is an increase in the number of youths in negotiation processes, and whereby they're not viewed just as mere beneficiaries, but as major stakeholders? Thank you.
Good question, Asha. First, we do have a movement of youth across the region through the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Even through our country platforms like Kenya, we do have a youth movement across our regional. We have 7 regional offices where youth are actively engaged. In fact, they're the ones who drive agendas on climate justice. So one way we've been able to engage them is build their capacity for them to understand what really climate change is and how to respond to it. And we've been able also to give opportunities to youth through our trainings, through the Nairobi Summer School, through the Young Digital Activists, where we even employ them to be part of this conversation. But in terms of negotiation, yes, we've been able to support youth first, train on what negotiations during COPs and or even during pre-COPs are done. In our platforms, we have youth who are actually negotiators. Most of I think half of the youth are negotiators during COP. So there's that opportunity that they're able to have their own positions in terms of the role of youth on climate change. So we do provide for that opportunity. And Asha, if you're interested, you can join our platform so that you're able to also benefit from our trainings. Like every week, we do have opportunities for trainings or online opportunities through the podcast or Twitter Spaces. So that is one opportunity where you can learn before you even go for negotiations. Over to you, Collins.
Thank you. There's a saying that he who pays the piper calls the tune. This happens a lot as well in justice systems. Most of the funding that you receive, or because what you do costs money, where is it coming from, and how do you what measures are in place to prevent, be it imperialistic or in unjust agendas driving your good intentions to redefine justice in one group's interests against another group?
Yeah, our funding is donor based. Most of our funding comes from donors. And before we even get that funding, I think we clearly put our objectives and our agendas forward, which are very clear and targeted towards climate change. So, even the donors that fund us are very clear on what they expect. So we cannot go outside our mandate. So that's one way of ensuring that the money that is used, is given to us, is used for the right mandate. So far, the money that we've been able to receive, I think, has gone a long way in supporting climate actions, especially because we are big on advocacy. So you'll find us on spaces on advocating for climate justice within the region or within the country. So we don't use our money for other agendas, Collins. It's very clear that it's clearly on climate change action.
Okay, thank you for that. A number of governments have been pushing for, as one of their climate mitigation strategies, for laws that reduce the age of vehicles being imported. For example, in Kenya, I think you cannot import a very old vehicle. You cannot import an 8-year-old vehicle or a 10-year-old vehicle. I think as well in Uganda, there's a push to make it 5 years and the like. And this has consequently resulted to increasing the cost of transportation, which has affected women, children, youth, the vulnerable ones who use matatus, who don't have the luxury to either pay high, are now having to pay out more on transport bills. What kind of justice measures can be put in place to allow for older vehicles, but yet with efficiency, because the issue is efficiency of combustion. The issue is not whether it's old or new, but how efficient is its combustion, innovatively, in order to reduce on the cost of transportation.
Collins, interesting question there, and really hard to balance between climate change in terms of especially looking at the health effects. You can imagine a town like Nairobi, where there's a lot of combustion due to emissions from these inefficient vehicles. So we are looking at the balance between health and economy as well. So that has to, we have to strike a balance between the two. So for us, we've been advocating for, ensuring that any vehicles that are imported are efficient and cannot release a lot of gases. So for us is to ensure that there's that balance between economy and health. But I know for Kenya, 8 years is what most of the vehicles that are now being imported is not below 8 years, and I think it has really worked. So in looking at the transport and how much people are using, I think it's less compared to the effects on, especially the respiratory diseases that are caused by this combustion, especially for the populations living around the urban areas.
Thank you very much. Could you lend us some insight into your experience? Just after this question, I'll hear from Godwin. Lend us your insight into your experience concerning in the agriculture area. For instance, there was a debate between those who are pro GMOs, genetically modified organisms, versus those who are for the opposite of that. And because of the threat that when some seeds are imported, they have a dominating effect on the local species and kill local farmers or small-scale farmers from being able to grow their seeds. So in this context, has there any work been done for justice of these either small-scale farmers or their voices being heard? Because the GMO have also the advantage of being what they claim is resilient to climate, to harsh climates. So how have you handled that matter and the justice within in that context?
Collins, I may not be an expert on GMO, and I know there has been a lot of debate, especially in Kenya, on GMOs, especially last year when there was a need to introduce, especially during the drought that really affected our country. But there are also debate on, food security versus GMO. There was the debate on farmers who, in terms of safety of crops and health, etc. I don't want to comment much on that because I know we do have a wing and our, we have members who are dealing with that component as we speak. But I'll just say that not as an expert but an advocate, is there's need to strike between the GM food security and the genetically modified food and the health of the population. That's how I look at it.
All right, let's hear from Godwin. Your question, please.
Yes, Collins, mine is not a question. I just wanted to chime in when you had the discussion on the vehicle and the economy and human health, and you're asking of the strategies, and just to bring to fore that in East Africa as a community, there is a standards that have been passed for the East African community on vehicles, and actually they were gazetted in some of the countries, and the importing vehicle should be Euro 4, and that will be working towards us reducing our emissions. There's also much of strides that have been put towards electric mobility, which of course has its pros and cons, but then there's also investment on inspection and maintenance, which of course the standards have been put in by ESC. So there are all these measures that are playing around in issues of addressing this. But then in terms of linkage to the economy, in terms of the impact to the vulnerable, it's a chicken egg situation. And what they'll ask, it's a health thing vis-a-vis the economy. So what is the health implication of having polluted vehicle within your urban area in terms of economics of it, what you spend on a health bill vis-a-vis what you can pay for cleaner transport. But this, I think, is also an issue of initial costs, and with time, this tapers off. So Collins, that's what I wanted to chime in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Godwin. I appreciate that submission. In this debate of climate change, this balance is really a difficult balance, and it's an issue that of prioritizing an issue of beliefs, an issue of interests, as well as needs. And it turns out that a big category of our populations are not interested in this subject because they don't yet find their place of interest, belief being catered for in climate change, like those who already have made it their career. And if we look for economic viability of this social justice, because the economy can help lift up the vulnerable, as well as some of these legal frameworks that are put in place do not consider, for example, in fuel, when we say Euro 4, it means the quality of fuel must be higher and more efficient, and it means the price will be higher, and which I like. But now when the vehicle is older, there are technologies to make them more efficient. And this is also not put into the context. How do we make engines more efficient? You don't hear that conversation in climate change. And that we need to see how we get innovative social justice, innovative economic justice, and innovation means you provide solutions that strike the balance, that don't lean on one side. And let me hear from Anne on what you think you can do to help on this economic justice.
Colin, this is a conversation we can have outside here and see how we can work together. I know there's a team working on economy and climate change. We are a big team across the continent, and especially on energy. So it's something I think is being built on. I know we have a number of initiatives. I mentioned to you about the AXIA program in West Africa, and those are some of the conversations we really want to engage and see how we can advance. I can mention to you that we are looking also at other areas such as climate security in Africa. We are looking at climate health portfolio, and our energy climate nexus is also growing. So it's a conversation we can have with you together with Charles and see how we can advance that. But we are open to such suggestions.
Okay, let's. Mutonyi Doris, please.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. My question is, in 2019, we saw one of the world's largest projects, the Crescent Dunes, fail after only operating for 4 years. It's an energy manufacturing plant, solar manufacturing plant. And then we also saw another one in 2021 fail. My question is, have these alternative sources of energy been tested properly to convince the
which project did you say failed, Doris?
Hello, Doris. Are you there? Hello? Hello? Okay.
I wanted to. Okay, Doris.
She had written her comment on the platform, so let me just she'd mentioned there was one in the world's largest renewable energy plant, but then she didn't mention where it was at all. Sorry to be back. Yes, kindly, Anne, go on. Go ahead.
I don't know. It's what kind of energy plant? Is it on coal? Is it on? It's good to know which one exactly. Though I know, yeah.
What I took from her question was, when renewable energy sources are imposed on communities and businesses, and they are not reliable, she's asking, I think, about the justice around that. If they fail or they don't work or they're not as sustainable as the alternatives.
Good. I think that's a very interesting and a good question at the same time, because as a PACJA, we are promoting what we are calling just energy transition. We know that the world is now moving from dirty energy to now clean energy. We are moving from the likes of coal to now clean energy. But we know that many times clean energy is very expensive. If you look at solar technologies, they are quite expensive. I mean, if you look at wind technologies, if you look at the biogas technologies, those are very expensive alternatives. But going back, this is a conversation we've been having as PACJA, that if you look at the developed countries, they actually they build the economy using this dirty or those dirty fuel, and they are telling us we now need to move to clean technologies. In Africa, we've not made use of our coal, we've not made use of our oils. So how can they tell us to move to biogas, to solar, before we exhaust our natural resources? So the conversation is, before we move to clean technologies, first there's need to build capacities for African countries to understand these technologies. Second, we need this transfer of these technologies, and as they transfer, we need to ensure that their prices can be affordable with these growing economies. So that is the conversation we are having as through our AXIA program, to ensure that even as we move to clean technologies, where there's justice in terms of financing such technologies. Because I know most of the private companies now are taking advantage of the vulnerable groups to sell these clean technologies, not considering that even as we move, there's disjustice to these groups in terms of climate change, in terms of effects of climate change. So there's that conversation in terms of striking the balance between clean energy and the dirty energy. So that's a good observation. Can't remember the name. Yeah, but I'll address that way.
Thank you. There is a question from Ray Bond. A question from Reborn. Reborn, are you there? Let's hear from Boaz. Boaz, are you there?
Thank you very much, Collins. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Boaz.
Yeah, I want to say I'm honored to participate in such an event. My name is Boaz Ogada. I'm a climate change adaptation expert, serving at the Institute for Climate Change Adaptation at the University of Nairobi. And I am very impressed to learn about the life-changing opportunities that PACJA is doing in order to increase our climate resilience. And so my question would just have to be, in the programs that you are executing, do you have mechanisms of reporting your climate actions? Because at the global level, we find Africa and more so developing countries lack data and information required to make evidence-based decision-making. So in that climate reporting, therefore, we will want to see if you are incorporating methodologies that are being that form central discussion at the global conferences, so that we will want to see if do you measure your adaptation actions, your mitigation actions, and you also have a framework for measuring your climate finance aspect, yeah, so as to guide us into making evidence-based decision as we move forward. And secondly, I would like to ask to inquire if you have platform where you engage with multiple stakeholders, more so from the research community, because we know that climate change as an evolving field, there are new information to learn every day. And so we would like to see if there is that close interaction with the academia and even other stakeholders where we can have that platform of sharing knowledge. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Boaz, for that question. I'll start with the last one. Yeah, our platform, like in Kenya, has academia who really supports us in terms of knowledge generation and sharing. We've been able even to share, to sign a memorandum of understanding with most of the universities, with Kenyatta University, Meru University. So we work very closely, especially on research related to climate and environment. They are part of our members in the platform, so we do have that. That window. We don't work alone. We work with the media. We work with academia. We work with even with some of our members are from government, so it's inclusive, including the private sector. In terms of reporting, yes, I know under the United Nations frameworks on climate change, they are reporting mechanism, looking at the biannual reports, reporting under the NDC, reporting on, even there's a global stocktake process coming soon. So our initiatives are not outside what is provided in the framework. So in our reporting, we work closely with government. In fact, most of the forums, we are engaged. We participate in government forums in terms of such agenda, so that we are able to report and even support the policy process. So yeah, we do that as at least for Kenya, but I know even for other platforms, they do the same.
Thank you very much, Anne. Maybe just as a follow-up question, do we have a link to where we can get the status of these reports that you're talking about? Yeah, so that we can at least internalize, and if there are gaps, perhaps we can raise them as stakeholders, interested, persons of interest, that is. Thank you.
Most of these reports are spearheaded by the ministry. We may have our own internal reports for reporting our activities, but in terms of reporting under UNFCCC, you can get in the UNFCCC website or the government's website, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So you can have those reports in their website. Ours, we may just have our activity reports or our programs report, which may not inform reporting. Which are not actually reports that would inform the are part of the UNFCCC, but the main reports are driven by the government itself.
Thank you. Can we hear from Anje Kigundu?
Thank you. Sorry if I'm late to the party. I just have a question that Anne, you had mentioned, I don't know if it was in your presentation, and maybe I came in a bit late and so I didn't hear this. You had mentioned that there are certain agendas that are being pushed by, I don't know, maybe the Western countries under the disguise of pushing for climate change mitigation. Maybe you can help me shed some light on what these agendas are?
Thank you.
I think those were raised by Collins. I don't want to. You mentioned about the radicalization. I know the agendas on. There are things that are being pushed in the name of climate change. Collins, you want to highlight those ones?
Anne, you're the justice. You're the advocate. So I would rather that you tell us who your adversaries are.
Let me not bring that conversation to this space, because some of these conversations are very sensitive, but I know there's the aspect of radicalization, and the rest. So Angie, yeah, they're there, but as PACJA, we don't, use climate change to communicate such agendas or to advance such agendas.
Okay, so that was mainly just to educate myself, but I understand if you're unable to answer on this platform. maybe just to understand, when you say that you educate these vulnerable groups on, what climate change really is and how they can prevent its impacts on their livelihoods, are you able to let us know how this what's the difference between what you're educating them on and what's been put out there? I don't know if this question you can answer.
No, basically, Angie, we've done a lot of education on. If you go to our website, you'll get a lot of information on what's happening out there. But how we do it, we do have open forums or public forums, especially during the international days where we organize people and teach them about the climate change. We do have social media. If you go to PACJA website or the Kenya platform website, you'll get a lot of information there. We do have regional forums where we teach people on what is like the parliamentary summit on climate change that is happening in South Africa. That is one of the ways we are now teaching the public on what is climate change. But specifically, we do have targeted trainings for our members, like workshops. We could have a workshop on loss and damage. We could have a workshop on gender, climate finance, all that. So that is how we train our public. And like most of the time, we have agreements with Media House so that we have targeted sessions and documentaries on climate action as well. Angie, I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Perhaps a bit more on that, if I may ask, is there, would you say there is a definition of injustice when in the manner in which climate change is defined? Is there an unjust way compared to a just way?
I would address injustices as per my presentation in terms of distribution of resources between the North and the South. I would address it in terms of injustices to the vulnerable groups. I would address injustices in terms of climate financing, because we find that that is an avenue of addressing climate, but you find that even getting to the this climate financing mechanism is hard, like the Green Climate Fund or any fund, global fund on climate issues. So I'll address injustices in that context there, Collins.
Thank you. One last question from Doris.
Thank you so much, Collins. I have another question and another concern. I've read in the news where in some countries, people have been restricted from rearing animals. Farms have been shut down, and people are limited from eating certain foods like meat and the animal foods. Don't you think that is an injustice to normal diet, and also to the economies of this, to the finances of the people and the countries that are depending on livestock as a source of income? To me, it's an injustice, but please highlight on that.
Thank you.
Collins, you want to help me on that? On what context are these people not allowed to? Yeah.
I think the example she's raised is in New Zealand. There was a law that was passed saying reduction of looking after animals because of they call it the BAP. The animals produce more carbon.
Yeah,
I think in Netherlands the farmers had to demonstrate by putting tractors on the road, because there was a law that was being passed saying that they need to cut down on their agricultural production because of climate change concerns.
Okay, I get you.
Something like that. So
she's clear, right? Oh, now it's clear. I didn't understand why they're being okay. what happens, Doris, is that each country commits to reduce greenhouse gases emission. Like in Kenya, we've committed like 43 or 73 metric tons in the next by 2030. So in that commitment, you say in each sector, this is how much you will reduce. If you look at the energy sector, agriculture, water, forest, you have to commit like in the roads, this is how much you will reduce in the land sector. This is how much you will reduce. If you look at the agriculture sector, especially in the livestock, those are one of the biggest emitters in terms of greenhouse gases, especially methane. So you'll find countries such as, you said, New Zealand, saying that we need to cut on production of livestock so that we cut on emissions. So those are just measures to cut down on emissions. Some countries would say we'll reduce the number of vehicles or going to town, or we'll use we'll use electricity as our means of transport. So there are many ways in which different countries cut on emissions. Like in Kenya, we said we'll plant more trees so that we can reduce those emissions. You get, so it will be a human right issue. From their perspective, but not. From their end, they'll know how to address it. It could be a human right issue, or it could be an alternative to reducing emissions. So I'll look at it that way, Doris. It's a two-way issue. We can't hear you, Colin.
Thank you very much. Any final remarks, last remarks to conclude your presentation on climate justice, and maybe some highlights you picked from here?
Thank you so much, Collins, and thanks once again for inviting PACJA to this conversation. We are happy to have more of these conversations and to highlight to teach the public what really climate change is and what we need to do. But more so, we really wish that youth take action, because in the next generation, this is the next generation that will take over the responsibilities. And with time, there are more emissions, there are more devastating effects of climate change, and the youth really needs to come out and take action. So that is one of the areas I would address. The other one is that the community. Most of the actions need to be driven by the community. It's not the top-up approach, but the bottom-up approach. The action by each and every member of the community really adds up. And let's have more of this conversation and teach the public on what are the effects of this climate change. Thank you, and over to you, Collins.
Thank you very much. And for our participants, thank you so much for participating. Some observations I make is that most of our presenters have indicated that they are using a bottom-up instead of a top-down approach. So from that, I think it's an idea that this subject of climate change can be decentralized. And we hope that out of this discussion, more ideas emerge. And I also would like to thank Kenyatta University and His Excellency, who was the first presenter, for his presentation. We hope that we will have more discussions on this, and perhaps go deeper on one subject at a time. And perhaps if there's any other interest group or so, Patricia can share an email to which we can get some post-discussion feedback, ideas of how we can address the next discussion. Thank you very much from Leverage Africa. We hope we can leverage most of Africa's resources and potential to address this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for moderating this session. Mr. Collins is the MD for Leverage Africa. And thank you to each and every participant who's been able to join us from 10 o'clock. It's now going to 1:30. We have posted a form, a link on the chat. Kindly fill it in and give us feedback. We can see how to improve better. We will be having another webinar in coming months. So look out for on our socials when we will post it. A question has been made whether we have any WhatsApp platform. We do not have any at the moment, but we will see what to do on the way forward, even as we look at engaging with both private actors, non-governmental organizations, academia, and students to also benefit from. And even for students who are looking towards improving or growing in the area of climate change, climate justice, FACTA is one platform, and we do hope we bring other organizations together so that we are able to work together in one direction and have one voice. So thank you very much. Kindly do not forget to give us your feedback by filling in the form, which is in the chat. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very blessed day. Thank you. I'm sorry, a question was asked whether there is a recording. There is a recording at Boaz Ogada. Let me write my email on the chat for anyone who would want to get in touch with us on anything. I've put my email on the chat and you can get in touch with me. And also, we'll see how you will get access to the recording. But yes, we recorded the entire conversation. So with the feedback form, I believe we'll be able to get in touch with you. Else, if not, write me an email. Thank you.